The stage is officially set for Thursday as it will be a rematch between Canada and the United States for the Four Nations Championship. Now, the big question is, are we going to get Jaccob Slavin versus Seth Jarvis for part two?
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the everydayer for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Highcars, also do some AHL work over at the Calder Times. I am the co-host on the Searchcast, along with all my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. Got a great show for you guys on a Tuesday edition of the pod, as we get to talk about how Canada did punch their ticket to the final in their 5-3 win over Finland, but mostly talk about why Seth Jarvis just wasn't in that game or being available for them. In that same game, Canada almost blew that 4-0 lead that they had. And then finally, we're going to talk about what to look for when it comes to USA versus Canada rematch. Not going to go to a super huge detail, but that'll be more so for the Thursday part of the pod. But before we jump into everything that goes into the Tuesday edition of the podcast, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Now, going into the game on Monday, we all knew what the scenarios were. Basically, whoever wins in regulation between Canada and Finland go on and play the United States on Thursday in the Four Nations final. If that game does go into a shootout overtime, then it goes into the possibility that if Sweden wins in regulation, they're in the final. Of course, with the United States already in, didn't really matter. It's just kind of like what factor would the USA play in, depending on how Canada and Finland played out. Basically, whoever lost in that first game is eliminated. And in the end, Canada did win 5-3. But the main things in terms of the Hurricanes type of focus for that game for Canada and Finland was that Seth Jarvis was healthy scratched in that game. While he did participate in warm-ups, of course, anyone who's watched the NHL, they might have an extra guy dressed just in case of someone who's sick, maybe dealing with an injury, who's a potential game time decision, might sit out. They have an extra guy dressed just in case, that way he's not having to scramble down from the press box. So Seth Jarvis was a possible guy who could either play or sit out. In the end, he was taken out for Travis Konecny of the Philadelphia Flyers, and Seth Jarvis in a do-or-die game was healthy scratched. And, I kind of voiced my displeasure on social media about it, because but if you're Canada, you definitely need one of those guys like a Seth Jarvis, who's a great two-way, 200-foot player. Of course, some comments are saying, well, Travis Konecny is just as good. They're the same type of player. And while there may be some characteristics of their game maybe somewhat being similar, you're still talking about a guy like Seth Jarvis, who is someone who's been pretty consistent over, when you look at last season and even this year as well. And I do get the sentiment from Hurricanes fans going, well, selfishly, it's kind of okay if he's sitting out because, he doesn't, the less risk of an injury, you want ready for the Hurricanes. And I understand that. I totally get that. But for me, it's more of you want to see the opportunity of your guys playing on a big stage, because you always hear about, well, the Hurricanes guys never get enough recognition. They're always overlooked and this, that, or the other. And if you have one of your guys sitting out, it's just kind of, I wouldn't say it fits the narrative, but it kind of gives the argument of, well, this guy from the Hurricanes just didn't play because he isn't playing up to his potential, or the Canadian team thought they didn't really need him. And maybe that could be true, maybe that could be false, but for me, it's like, for a guy like Seth Jarvis, he wants to play. How much of an opportunity this was for him, and for him to be healthy scratch, it's just how does he feel about it? And that's kind of where I come onto the fact of, yes, selfishly, you don't want him to play as much because you want him healthy for the Hurricanes. But at the same time, it's like, I know how much this means to him for the fact, he doesn't make the 2021 World Junior team. Yes, he's the only guy who, he beat all those guys out to make Team Canada. He's one of the 23 best Canadians in the AHL right now to make it. It's just kind of stinks. It's like, of all the guys to sit, it was him. Like, he was an even going into the game. He got an assist on the Brand Marchand goal, which that's Marchand's only point. And the crazy part is like Seth Jarvis in the 2 games was barely playing 11 minutes of average ice time, and Brad Marchand was playing less than he was. He was playing he was playing 9 minutes and some change. It wasn't like Seth Jarvis was the lowest, time on ice guy. I mean, Brad Marchand was, and he played. And you look at the Tampa Bay guys, like when they're all 3 of them are together, John Cooper's guys were a -8 going into that game against Finland. So that's why it's just kind of like, it doesn't make sense to me where he wants to play his guys more over Seth Jarvis and even Brad Marchand. And, like I said, Marchand was playing less than 10 minutes in the 2 games. Seth Jarvis was barely playing over 11. He was 11.05. It just doesn't make sense to me of like, you're basically like, I understand you want some extra guys, you want some other guys to play as well. But let's call a spade here. If your guys, mainly the Tampa Bay players, aren't really performing well when they're a combined -8, I would almost look at those guys to possibly replace if you're willing to bring Travis Konecny in that bad. Not Seth Jarvis, who's got a point for you. I mean, yeah, Canada did win, but it's still kind of like, it just doesn't make sense to me. It's like, of all guys to sit, Seth Jarvis had to be the guy to sit for that. And it's just crazy when, the Hurricanes saying this stinks, this is stupid. Most of the Hurricanes fans are not really happy about it, but then you see the comments of like, why does it matter? Like, he just wasn't playing well. Konechny's the same type of player, blah, 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 and all this other stuff. And it just goes to show that if you're not really watching the Hurricanes enough, that you're kind of it's just an automatic, oh, well, it's Seth Jarvis. He plays for the Hurricanes. It doesn't really matter. There's other guys who are maybe better. It's like, but are you really watching how Seth Jarvis plays? And that's the crazy thing to me. Is like, you see what he's done this year, and the fact that he's missed 7 games is still top 3 on the Hurricanes in points. I know on the Hurricanes website they have Mikko Rantanen listed first, but that's for the whole season, including Colorado. If we're going by just Hurricane stats, Seth Jarvis is second on the team, and he leads the team in goals. He's played 7 less games than the rest of the roster. That's the crazy part. 7 fewer games, leads the team in goals, and he's second in points, only behind Sebastian Aho. That's why, to me, it doesn't make sense of all the guys to sit, it had to be Seth Jarvis. And now comes into question, will he be playing on Thursday? I don't really know. And that's kind of like, you give him the opportunity to play the first 2 games. You sit him for a do or die championship appearance on the line. Now you go into Thursday. You're in Boston. You're going to face the United States, who are undefeated right now. As of this recording, of course, as I'm recording the episode here on Monday night, is that game's still going between the United States and Sweden, but it's just, the USA is really riding high. They just beat Canada in Montreal on Saturday night, 3-1. There's a potential for this is the last time for best on best before we get back to NHL action. And it's, for me, I would love to see Seth Jarvis in a do or die final game against Jaccob Slavin. I don't know. Like I said, I do see both sides of the argument of, okay, well, yeah, you want Seth to stay healthy. You don't want him to get hurt. You don't want to get ready for the Hurricanes when they come back and play Toronto on Saturday. And I get that. But also, it's like, for me, it's like, I think the guy really wants to play more than anything else. Like, you don't want to be healthy scratched in a do or die championship appearance on the line, and then it's a winner take all final on Thursday. I don't think you want him to sit for a game like that. I don't know. It's like I said, I can see both sides of the argument, but if you're asking me, I definitely think this is where, with a winner take all final, you want Seth Jarvis on that roster. And the fact is, Canada almost blew that opportunity, which is the crazy part. And we got to talk about that Canada game against Finland and how the fact they almost blew a 4-0 lead. So stick around. I'll also do that here in a second on a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. In sports, having a win strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they have helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage of up to $5 million. No medical exam required. And it's a more affordable than you think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedownahl. Go to selectquote.com/lockedownahl today to get started. Once again, that's selectquote.com/lockedownahl. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. And like I said at the end of segment 1, Canada did punch their ticket to the final against the United States for a very, once again, highly anticipated rematch, because if anything was like how Saturday was, it is going to be electric in Boston at TD Garden, because of course we all know 3 fights in 12 seconds. It's going to be a lot of high tensions, and get ready for a physical game on Thursday. But, Canada almost blew that opportunity. With a minute and 17 seconds left in the game, Canada gave up 2 goals in less than 30 seconds ago, from 4-1 up to only leading 4-3. And if it wasn't for a big hit from Sidney Crosby to get the puck and score on the empty net, who knows what would have happened. If this game went into overtime, this would really have set a really interesting stage between USA and Sweden, later on Monday night. And luckily for them, it kind of worked out to where they didn't have to worry about overtime, and they punched their ticket to the final against the USA. But for me, it's you go to Jordan Binnington for a third time, and under 900 save percentage, his goals against is pretty high. And, everyone's questioning, like, okay, is this going to be a good thing for Canada? Are they going to be in trouble? And for the most part, look like, okay, Canada might be okay, because the fact that, they're up 4-0 on Finland, they're showing why they're a high-powered offense, and, of why the most likely was going to be Canada and the United States in the final. But for me, that's, Finland gets 1 and they get 2 pretty quick. It's 4-3. And that should give a lot of pause for Canada. Of course, I'm not going to say it's guaranteed for the States to win on Thursday night, but there's going to be a little bit of doubt kind of playing involved there a little bit, because you go to Jordan Binnington for the 3rd straight game that Canada has to play, and now going into the final on Thursday. Do you do that? Do you go back to him for a 4th straight game, or do you go to Montembeault or Aiden Hill? And both those guys have basically been sitting for the most part outside of practices. And it's just one of those things of, what do you do? Like what do you really do here? It's like I said, it's not going to be a guarantee. But if you're Canada and if you're Canadian fans, you should be happy the fact you got into a final. But now it's you barely beat Sweden in overtime. You lost 3-1 to the States, and then you almost blew a 4-0 lead to Finland going into a game where, depending on how the United States-Sweden goes, you're still going to get a USA team that's feeling very confident. Now you're, playing in Boston for a final. It's going to be, it's going to be highly anticipated. It's going to be physical. The bad blood's going to be there, because we saw it in game 1 on Saturday. So you're probably going to see it again on Thursday. It's just there should be a lot of pause of how you're going to do this, because obviously Canada's playing their top 6 a lot more than pretty much anyone else. And now it's a question of, is Seth Jarvis going to be in? Or you bring Konechny in? How are the lines going to be set up and stuff like that? And, and do you go to Binghamton for a 4th time? And let's say you do switch it. Let's say you go to an Ian Hill or a Montembeault. Do you feel confident going one of those guys with them? The tournament started last Wednesday and the finals on Thursday. Are you really going to be confident of going into a final when a winner take all? And if you don't go with Bennington, do you go with one of the 2 guys that has not played since the Four Nations break started for the NHL? That's a tough order to ask. Be like, hey, we know we've been riding Jordan the whole time. Let's go with one of these other guys. I don't think you can really do that. And then it's like, okay, do you really trust Jordan Binnington to go up again against the States who got goals against him? And yes, he gave up 2 in the net. It's, I don't know. Where do you go here if you're Canada? Do you go back to him for the 4th time? Then if you do, how is he going to fare? How's the rest of the team going to be, knowing that you're going with the same guy for a 4th straight game? And how confident is the States? They go, okay, we already got this guy once. We could probably do it again to him. And with Canada, how they're going to try to play structurally with their forwards and with the defense and stuff like that. Like I said, when the fact you almost blew a 4-0 lead to Finland, that's kind of tough, especially in the fact that Finland got pumped by the States 6-1 to open up the whole thing. Then, of course, they did beat Sweden. They had to beat them in overtime. And they basically almost came back against Canada. That's, like I said, that's a very tough look for Canada going into a game where you're facing the United States, who are feeling pretty good about themselves. Like I said, they beat Finland pretty good. They beat Canada 3-1 in a very physical game, and where they, really took advantage of, just the bad blood and, kind of setting the tone. And of course, they're playing Sweden. Yeah, it's a meaningless game, and they're playing short. Guys got hurt during the game as well, but you're still feeling pretty good if you're the States, because you still have all day Tuesday, all day Wednesday to recover, practice, try to get all your guys healthy enough to be ready for Thursday. Like I said, if you're Canada, is there doubt? Is there a, oh my goodness factor to this game? Because, like I said, you almost blew a game like this to Finland, where you have Sebastian Aho on the wing. The defense isn't really that great. They had to do a lot of switch ups as well in their lineups. Goaltending can only do so much. But like I said, it should really give you a lot of pause if you're Canada. I mean, I could be wrong on this, but that's a tough look going into Thursday, where you had to squeak through your first game. They win in overtime. You lose pretty big to the States. I mean, not score-wise big, but that was a highly anticipated game where, there's a lot of bragging rights, and Sidney Crosby is no longer perfect as Canada captain in international games. And like I said, you're up 4-0 on Finland. You let them crawl back to within 1 with 1 minute and 17 seconds left, and you needed a clutch hit by Crosby to find a way to get the empty netter to eliminate them and put your ticket to the final on Thursday. So we know this game is going to be crazy. It's going to be highly anticipated. The physicality is going to be there. We're going to probably see a lot more fights. What's the lineup situation going to look like? How are the feeling of Canada going into that game thinking, okay, the USA came to Montreal, beat them. How are you feeling going into Boston? It's not like I said, it's not been the easiest tournament for Canada at all. The States, like I said, they dominated Finland. They beat Canada pretty good. They're playing right now against Sweden, as I'm saying, as part of this recording. USA really hasn't had, the Canada game was tough. I mean, they played a really structural game against Canada, and they're pretty much in a I wouldn't say meaningless, but it's not. They're not they're still amped for it, because you don't want to take your foot off the gas, especially when you have the final on Thursday. But it's a game where it's they don't really have to control their destiny. They're already there. But you look at Canada, they had to play the hard way of making it to a final. like I said, overtime win, losing close to the States, and then almost blowing a 4-0 lead to Finland. It's not been an easy Four Nations for Team Canada. And like I've been saying it for the whole time, it's the goaltending is going to be the biggest question mark. And you almost saw goaltending almost do that to them. And now you get to face, we're saying now you get to face the United States once again, a team that's been playing very hot this tournament. That's going to be very, very interesting. And you know what? Canada's going to put themselves in an interesting situation. And now, now all eyes are on Thursday. It's USA, Canada for the rematch. And we'll talk about more of that here in a second. So stick around, as I will cover that in a bit on a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into the same game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers can bet $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. And like I said, you got USA, you got Canada on Thursday. This is going to be a very highly anticipated matchup between these two teams. As of recording right now, Sweden is up 2-1 in the States in the second intermission. And like I said, it was one of those things where it's not really do or die for the United States. Or they're not going to control their destiny. They're already in the final. Sweden is basically just trying to play for bragging rights of points at this point over Finland. So they're up 2-1 in the second intermission. But this game on Thursday against Canada is going to be electric, to say the least. Like I said, USA won 3-1 the last time these two teams met each other. Game is set for an 8 p.m. puck drop. Of course, we'll go more into the details later. This will be on ESPN and ESPN Plus. So far, the States lead pretty much in every category. 40% on the power play, 100% on the penalty kill, which is tied with Canada. First in face-off percentage, first in goals for, first in goals allowed. They've only let up 1 goal each in the 2 games. But if you're looking at the States, this is where, you have Jay Gottinger in Game 3 against Sweden. You're obviously going to go back to Connor Hellebuck, but this is, for me, it's a, do we get a part 2 to a Seth Jarvis, Jaccob Slavin? Of course, remember the game on Saturday, Seth Jarvis tried to throw a hit on Slavin. Of course, we all know how that played out. Slavin with a reverse hit. And everyone's all the Canes fans are kind of laughing. It's like, come on, Seth, you can't do that to Jaccob Slavin. Jaccob Slavin probably had a funny little text exchange with Seth after the game for sure. You would have to think that something had to be said because that was pretty funny how that kind of played out. But do we get that matchup, though? Do we get them going against each other in a winner-take-all game on Thursday? If that's the case, you're kind of just like, well, what was the point of having Seth there? And nothing against Seth Jarvis. Don't get me wrong. Everyone knows how much I like Seth Jarvis, but why would you waste the guy's time to have him be, okay, we're going to play you in these 2 games, but then it's a chance for a final up for a possibility not going to play you. And if they healthy scratch him for Thursday, that's like, that kind of just stinks for him because like you brought him all the way up there for the tournament. You play him in the first 2 games, and then it's like you don't really see him. So I'm hoping that's not the case. Because it would stink if you were hoping for an anticipated showdown on Thursday where you get Seth Jarvis against Jaccob Slavin in a winner-take-all for the championship trophy in the Four Nations, because you want those bragging rights over your teammate. I mean, you probably still get it regardless depending on who wins, but I think it would mean more if you're on the ice for that. Like, you're in that moment. So for me, it's like, yeah, you're getting a rematch of USA Canada, which is going to be fun. It's going to be highly anticipated. It's going to be crazy. But at the same time, you're really hoping that you get that part 2 of the showdown between these guys. And the last thing you want to see is okay, we got them to face each other one time on a Thursday to potentially set up a do or die Monday to set up the other half of the final, and that you don't get that again for a rematch for a trophy or the the bragging rights and all the other stuff. So I just feel like if we don't get Seth Jarvis and Jaccob Slavin, I know a lot of Keniacs are going to be very disappointed of how that just didn't really work out. And I know a lot of others are going to be like, well, Seth is going to be more rested. They'll be ready for Saturday against the Maple Leafs. Like I said, and I said it back in segment 1, I get that. But you're talking about best on best. We haven't had this in 9 years. You want to see the best guys going up against each other. And you want that extra storyline of bragging rights for your teammates, where it's Slavin against Jarvis, Slavin and the USA won that first matchup in Montreal. Now, does Seth Jarvis in Canada get the revenge in Boston for the final? Or does Jaccob Slavin in the States, go back-to-back on Canada? Who really knows? But if you don't get that, then it's kind of like, well, yeah, it's still going to matter because there's still, bragging rights of who won the trophy. But you don't have that extra advantage of like, oh, yeah, I faced Jaccob Slavin, or yeah, I faced Seth Jarvis. He was a tough, battle in that game. But if you don't get that, you're kind of missing a storyline that'd be really cool for Canes fans, at least. I know NHL, for the hockey world, it doesn't really matter if it's those two guys against each other. You're still talking best on best with, Jaccob Slavin leading the entire team in of the States in time of ice, an average over 23 minutes, and he leads the entire team in +5. And then you got Seth Jarvis with a point, who's an even, but he's playing less than 11 minutes. Or he's playing a little over 11 minutes in the 2 games he was in. It's just, you want that extra storyline. You want to have that little extra of something to talk about. It's like, oh, yeah, I saw, Seth Jarvis go up against Jaccob Slavin in a winner-take-all championship for 4 nations for the first tournament that we've seen best on best of the NHL players in over 9 years. Like, you want that extra piece to it, but I don't know. It'll be very interesting to see how that goes on. And I'll do more of a deep dive into this game, when we do the preview for Thursday's episode and stuff like that. And maybe we're going to get a better idea of what timelines of like storylines, timelines, all this other stuff too. But for me, looking at it as of right now, like I said, USA is losing 2-1 in the second intermission as of this recording. We know Canada punched their ticket in, almost blew it to Finland. And like I said, you don't have Seth Jarvis in a very important game. And now there's the question of, do you see him on Thursday? And do you see Jerome Bennington in the net for the 4th time of this tournament? And, obviously the States are going to go back to Connor Hellebuck. I think for me, it's like, I would love to see Seth Jarvis in the biggest game of his international career when you're talking about a 4-nation final, championship on the line, and you're going against Jaccob Slavin, who is the best defensive defenseman in the NHL. And that's kind of something that you want, because you want to have that extra little, bragging rights, the little extra juice of, yeah, I won this tournament and I beat my teammate in this game. You're adding a lot of extra layers of storylines and bragging rights and, what this meant to those type of guys. So for me, I'm excited for how Thursday's going to be. If we're talking like Kane on like Hurricane against Hurricane storyline, I want this for Seth Jarvis and Jaccob Slavin, because it's going to be very fun for those guys going into that game and even after the game too, when they're back in Carolina with the rest of the team and being like, yeah, I beat this guy and his team to win this trophy. And you would love to see that for them. But I guess we'll see. I know we're still a couple days out. Hopefully we kind of know when we get closer if we're going to get that part 2 of a Slavin versus Jarvis rematch. But I guess we'll see. But overall, guys, that will be a Tuesday episode of Locked on Hurricanes. Thank you for making your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked on Fantasy Hockey, the Fantasy Hockey Expert, and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked on Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to keep up with me, I'm at One True Zach on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky at the Zachary Martin. I do have link trees in my bios where you can check out all my articles at the Hockey Writers or thehockeywriters.com. If you want to check out my AHL coverage, well, it's at thecaldertimes.com. If you want to check out my other podcast, well, it's the Searchcast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. For this show, well, Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, Locked On Hurricanes, where you need to search, leave a 5-star rating and review, and follow because I might just read it on the podcast. Now, if you want to check out the YouTube, well, it's Locked On Hurricanes on YouTube. Subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss a show. Leave a thumbs up button to let me know if you like the show as well. Share with other Keniacs so they become everydayers just like you. But I hope everyone enjoyed the Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Hope everyone enjoys their Tuesday. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.